Hello and welcome, Albion community, to another development recap. My name, as always, is Robin Henkys. I'm the game director of Albion Online. And today I thought I'd talk about something that's been keeping the team very busy. A lot of the team is involved in this. I think I've mentioned it before as well. It's the world rework. It's one of the key points why we're still working on Albion is to make the world the best it can be. And right now, what we're doing is pretty much giving the world its final shape. We've gathered a lot of experience over previous betas, and we feel we've now reached the point where we can really lay out how the world will look for Albion for a long time. Although obviously, with Albion being an MMO, you can look forward to changes coming even after launch. Determining the initial shape is very, very important because obviously changing the world is not that easy. You would have to move buildings around, you'd have to move players around. So we really need to do a good job on this, and that's why we're putting so much focus on it. So to create a good world for Albion, we think three things are very important. One is it has to be a believable world. It has to be a really immersive world where you can get lost in and believe it as a fantasy world. But it also has to be a meaningful world, a world where you can do interesting activities, where you can pursue all sorts of careers and gameplay in the end. Fight monsters, gather resources, all kinds of interesting things happen in the world of Albion. And finally, it has to be a very strategically designed world. It has to be a world that supports the unique gameplay of Albion Online, that deals with open world PvP, that deals with guild versus guild PvP. All these sort of activities are very unique to Albion and they have to be supported by the world. So the first point, how are we making a believable world? Well, you might say our previous worlds in the previous beta have been very grid-like. They were very regions arranged in a very grid-like structure. And to a degree, this was due to time constraints. This was done because we had to get a very large world out there for testing. And we always knew that it's still a test world. So we weren't maybe putting quite as much emphasis on the immersion of the world and more on the functionality. But now we've decided it's time to really de-grid this world, to make it more believable, to make it more organic, more natural in its shape and in its region placement. So that's a very big focus of the redesigned world, to give the world named regions, landmarks, places you can recognize again that don't look like the next place that you've just seen. So there's a lot of emphasis going into doing these sort of things, putting mountains on the maps, putting lakes on the maps. One thing that will be cool, you'll also see are more unique cities. So like in the past beta, we've always used the same city layout because it was a very effective city layout with very short distances. But it wasn't adding the amount of character that we really wanted. So in the next phase, you can look forward to cities getting a unique look per biome. So you'll see a city in the swamp looking completely different from a city in the mountain. A city in the highlands will also look completely different. Every city in each biome will have a unique look, and you can recognize the resources available in a biome by the city. So the forest city will be made from a lot of wood, the highland city will have a lot of stone, and so on. I think that's a really cool and exciting way to make the world more believable and immersive. Finally, we're giving you a better view at the world. The world map's obviously a very important way of viewing the world, is how you perceive it mainly. And so far you've been quite restricted at how far you can zoom out. And we're now adding more functionality to the world map that allows you to zoom out all the way and see the world at a continent level, but still zoom in close enough so you can see the details and see the life that's gone into the map. I really think this will help make this the most interesting and believable world Albion has had yet. The next topic, or the next key point, as I said, was the more meaningful world. A meaningful world means there's not only nice visuals, there's also meaning to those visuals, right? We introduced the new biomes in the last phase of beta, and those were quite a success in that regard, we think. They are a nice visual change, but they also come with very strong meaning. Certain resources can only be found there, and that will inform the choices of gatherers going to harvest a particular resource. You know, as a miner, you would not go into the forest anymore. You've learned that, and it's communicated through the visuals, and it's for us the perfect symbiosis of gameplay and the visuals. So adding more biomes is not really an easy way of expanding the game. So we're looking into adding interesting choices in different ways and expanding the things you can do in an average cluster. One example of this are the camps, small mob locations that can rarely spawn something extremely valuable. They'll have boss creatures, and they'll also have loot chests that you can capture, and you'll find these all across the world. We're also bringing back the resource hotspots. So this was a feature in Beta 1 that a lot of people liked, where you had locations that were very valuable in terms of a certain resource. And we're now bringing those back within the biome. So in the forest, you'll find a grove of valuable trees. In addition to just the grove, we're also bringing in the guardians, massive critters, massive creatures, like the giant forest spirit that's protecting these resource hotspots. That should be a very exciting addition to the world. Finally, there's also the altars, which we're bringing back. These were previously used for enchanting items. We've since moved that ability into the towns because we thought it was very, very important to the game, and it needed to be a centerpiece. So we have these assets, and we decided to bring them back with something we call living essences. Living essences are creatures that haunt these places, and you can go to these locations if you have a particular need of essences to work with enchanted resources, but also that we'll be introducing some new options of what you can do with essences. So that should be really exciting to have these locations in the world. It's very important to note that all of these locations are being added with constantly improved level design tools. So in the background, a big reason of why we were reworking the world was that we were improving our ability to modify it as we go along. So you can look forward to additional individualizations coming for clusters in the future as the game proceeds. There's a lot more I could talk about individualization of the world. I think the final thing that's important to mention are the special zones. So we've had some of these before, but we will be reworking them and introducing new ones, the faction home bases, locations where you can go in a large group of players and really take on the biggest open world PvE challenges that Albion has, while under the threat of PvP gameplay. And that concept will be expanded upon and reworked and improved, and I think it will help a lot with the individualization of the world. Right. Oh, there's even more on my list I could talk about. So yet another thing we're doing to make the world more unique are the tunnel networks. Tunnel networks, or passages, are a different type of connection between regions. So most of the time you exit a region through its side exit and you come out in the next one. With the tunnels, it'll be slightly different. You're exiting it through a passage, so you'll be in a sort of drawn-out passage that is a choke point, and that can be quite dangerous in PvP. But in the new world, it will also be an opportunity to move things around more quickly, to take shortcuts. And that, I think, will create a very exciting decision for the players. Do I go for the shorter passage with less time spent, but higher risk of encountering someone and getting involved in PvP? Or do I take the longer way around? That will also play a major role in the Outlands, but we'll get to that in a moment. The final point I want to talk about is the strategic design of the world map. The thought that has gone into supporting the specific types of gameplay that Albion needs. We have, open world PvP, but we also have players who want to gather on their own and who maybe don't want to be killed every single time. And then we have guilds who want to fight other guilds on a large scale. So we have a lot of different gameplay that the world has to support at the same time. And looking at that and looking at our goals of what we wanted to achieve with the system, we felt that it was necessary to rework large parts of the world, both the Outlands and the Royal Continent. So we'll start with the Royal Continent. The idea of the Royal Continent is to be an entry point for new players, but it's also the economic backbone of the world. It's where a lot of the trading happens, where a lot of the base resources are generated, where basically a lot of the economic players are playing who aren't part of a large guild but who are interested in crafting and gathering. It's generally a place of the more peaceful-minded players who aren't in the game for PvP, but who are in the game for the economy and the thrill of being in a world driven by players. And it also, on top of all of that, is the place where players can have their first PvP experiences, or where they can have small-scale PvP experience, being the person who roams the red zone hunting for traders, but not necessarily in a large group, because the reputation system kind of puts a stop to that. It's more about the small-scale PvP. So when we looked at the design that we previously had and analyzed it, there were a lot of things we liked, but there were also some things we didn't like. And I think I've said this before, that we felt that there were cities that weren't quite achieving what they should have been achieving. Queen's Market is right now the centerpiece of attention, but all of the other cities are underachieving. So while we were thinking about that problem, we came up with a design that is much closer to what we wanted to have for Albion all the time. We now have a circular design, so the Royal Continent will be round, and we'll have several cities around the outer edges. Each city will be the centerpiece of one region, and each region will be focused on one biome. So basically you have a capital city for each biome. That should ensure you have an economic imbalance that is interesting for traders to work with, because one city will have more resources of one type and a deficit of another resource type. But it also ensures interesting trade routes, because you can now go around the circle, which is a long way, but it's through somewhat safe space, or very safe space. And then you can go through the center of the circle. And the center of the circle will be the red zone. It will be the dangerous zone. It's the zone where the Royal Guard can't really keep control. And this allows traders an interesting choice. Do I go straight through the PvP zone and into the city, which will also be found at the center? Or do I go around and take more time for my trading? I also think this is a really cool opportunity for having players attack trade caravans and this sort of thing. The other interesting thing there is that this more concentrated PvP zone in the center ensures there's more activity, because we were observing quite a tendency that the red zones were running very empty. But at the same time, the reputation system should ensure that not all encounters run deadly, that basically players will think twice before attacking someone on the Royal Continent. So we're really excited about this rework, because I think it really helps get the ideas, the original dream of Albion, of trade going through PvP zone, of bandits versus traders, of living in a dangerous world, gets us much closer to that. It should be really exciting. The other part of the strategic need of Albion is the GVG, or the guild versus guild side of things. We have, it's a key piece of Albion. It's the centerpiece of Albion, is the fight of guilds versus guild and over territory and space. And that happens in the Outlands. It happens in the Outlands because this allows us to keep the beginning players somewhat safe from the large group of players which are involved in fights between guilds. It also happens in the Outlands because this allows us to design the Outlands exactly the way it needs to be to create interesting competition between guilds and interesting fights. So this was the thought that went into the redesign of the Outlands. They need to be the natural home of guilds. So what did we not like in the previous design? There were two center things. One, the distribution of time zones created a situation where guilds weren't enough in competition with each other. We had some very strong guilds spread across the world because they were settling in their time zone, and they weren't really ending up in a fight. We had the strongest guilds not close enough to each other to fight. And they also really didn't have a reason to fight because the resources were spread around so that they were maybe in control of some of the high-end resources in one part of the world, and another guild was in control of the high-end resources of the other part of the world, and neither had a reason to move to the other side to fight each other. So we're changing that. The key thought in the new Outlands is to make sure that at the center is a really high-value zone that has all the time zones. So basically, all the guilds at the top end will have a reason to settle in this central area of the Outlands and compete over the highest value resources in the game. But because we also felt we needed more space for less powerful guilds who are still on the rise, who still need to learn about the game, we have expanded the Outlands to have a region of lower value, but therefore also lower risk, because it's unlikely that really strong guilds will settle there. So it gives you an opportunity to stake a claim in the world, learn about the game, learn to compete, and then rise to power and eventually compete about the centerpiece, the central part of the Outlands. I think this new Outland design will be really, really exciting. It'll make, it takes the best parts of Beta 1 and Beta 2, gives us the intense action of Beta 1, and gives us some of the more thought out world parts, biomes, etc. from Beta 2. So that should be really exciting. I think that the highlight, though, of the Outlands will be the center cluster of each sort of region of the Outlands. That will be the most valuable place. It's sort of like a faction home base where you have raid mobs, you'll have the most valuable loot, and you'll have the most valuable resources there. And it won't be able to be controlled by a single guild. It doesn't have a watchtower, so you can't permanently control it. And it's right in the middle of a bunch of home territories for guilds. And this should create some really intense PvP action. And that's what I'm really looking forward to. So I hope you're as excited about the world changes as we are. Please, if you're interested in more of these videos, subscribe. And we'll see you in the next development recap. Until then, bye.